People of Reddit, what is your holy crap she wasn't lying moment? A professor friend of mine casually dropped that he was a founding member of Gaelic Storm and was, briefly, in the movie Titanic. I knew he played the Bodhran, Irish drum. I had been a GS fan for years, including playing their song in high school marching band in 2001. My friend is a bit of a rogue, so I was sure it was a joke, but then I looked at my old album covers and Wikipedia and holy crap, he really was a founding member. During my teen years, I did a lot of board gaming with my friends. I was perpetually missing curfew because the game wasn't over. Fast forward about 5 years, my best friend and gaming buddy is getting married, and all he wants for his bachelor party is one last epic gaming session. My parents had just moved into a new house, so we held the party there. As usual, the game went all night, and around 6 AM, my folks came downstairs to find 6 guys still in their kitchen rolling dice. They asked, incredulously, "What's going on?" To which I replied, "The game is still going." If you had videotape, you would have been able to see the moment in their eyes where they realized that I hadn't been lying to them about why I was missing curfew all those times. I had a high school friend who used to lie about everything. He pretended he had a girlfriend with DDT, but she went to another school, and he pretended his parents died, even though whenever we hung out we'd see them drop him off, and he pretended he had a foot-long dong. All sorts of crazy stuff. One time he was pantsed in gym class and his dong was actually enormous. Like it was disproportionately huge. It was like the man had Shaq's dong. If Shaq was white, and if Shaq has a big dong. I was chatting with a guy who was on the rugby team I had just joined back in 2007 or 2008, and the conversation turned to our girlfriends and someone piped up that the guy I was chatting with was dating a girl called Emma Watson. I asked if she ever got crap for having the same name as the actress. Nope, actually was dating the Emma Watson. So, a friend of mine evidently came down with armfuls off due to not eating gluten. See, she had something or other where eating gluten evidently made her swell a bit. So when she dropped that out of her diet she lost weight quickly, and then her right arm just sort of fell off. The skin was still in place and everything, but it fell a good 4 inches out of the socket. But it didn't hurt. She could just put it back. Still, she couldn't use it because the shoulder just kept coming apart. Anyway, she goes to the ear and says, while holding her arm on, "My arm keeps falling off." The nurse looks at her like she's trying to figure out if this is a junkie or something, so she lets go and her arm just drops. A nurse's eyes bug right the heck out and she calls for a doctor. At this point my friend has put her arm back, so she goes into a room and the doctor comes in. He says, "Now what was the problem?" and she tells him her arm keeps falling off. He looks at her like she's completely full of crap and he doesn't know why she's been allowed back here. When she lets go and her arm falls again, he freaks out. Finally they get her to a specialist, and so when she lets go, instead of freaking out, the guy goes, "Ooh cool." Anyway, turns out her ligaments were way too long there, and only the swelling and fat had been holding her shoulder together. So they had to surgically shorten the ligaments and give her this weird tape stuff that holds it all together while it healed. But yeah, turns out no one in the hospital really believes you the first time you say "my arm keeps falling off." I frequent a guitar forum that kind of centers itself on Les Pauls. One day a new member pops up and says, "I think I found Peter Frampton's guitar." A little backstory. There are a few very famous lost guitars that float around and people will occasionally claim to find them. 99.9% of the time it's total BS. Peter Frampton's black Les Paul from the cover of Frampton Comes Alive is one. It was lost when the cargo plane carrying his touring rig crashed in the late 70s. Anyhow, this dude popped up out of nowhere, came across as both incoherent and arrogant, and presented very flimsy evidence. Long story short, about 2 months later this guy is on a plane going to meet Frampton. The guitar has been verified, and Gibson started a limited run of the newly unearthed Frampton Comes Alive Les Paul. Visiting my mother at her nursing home. Tiny little wizened lady, probably about mid-80s, maybe 4 feet 8 inches 80 pounds stuck in a wheelchair. I had brought my Jack Russell Terrier in for a visit and she keeps saying to me, "My boyfriend has a dog just like that." Right, sure. Almost everyone there is confused all the time and it's common to hear weird claims like this. Forward to next week, there she is, in the common area, with an old man with his arm around her and a very fat Jack Russell Terrier on a leash. This made me very happy. My little sister ran downstairs and told me mom's dead. I told her no, she's probably just really sleepy. She wasn't lying. Mom was dead. My husband told me he used to spar with a famous kickboxer back in the day at his old gym. Sure, I get that you're in fantastic shape. Yeah, I've heard of the guy, but that was so long ago and there's no way to check that. Maybe once you got in the ring with the dude. 4 years later, the famous kickboxer emailed my husband out of the blue. He had always wondered where his favorite sparring partner ended up. I think they're planning on getting together in summer, so maybe I'll get to meet him, too. When I was 13 years old or so, I was on a tour in Israel and we visited the Dead Sea. The tour guide said very clearly, do not get the water in your eyes or mouth. Every time I take a group here, someone thinks it won't be too bad and they try a sip of the water or put their head under. Don't do that. Trust me, you do not want the water in your eyes or mouth. I was in the water for about half an hour. It's truly an awesome place. I even got yelled at for swimming too close to the Jordan side cause you can't sink, so I tried to swim all the way across, or so. And then this kid named Daniel does a belly flop and splashes the water into my and 2 other people's faces. I was crying into a towel for half an hour, and my eyes didn't stop hurting for about 5 hours. Those of us who got splashed and Daniel had our own little corner of misery in the tour bus. And the taste, I can't even put it into words. So I'm a mechanic at a dealership and we see some weird things come in. Hoarder cars, messy cars, freaking broken ass cars that shouldn't be on the road. But nothing compared to the crap storm of a car this story is about. I'm minding my own business working on a customer vehicle when I see one of our porters bringing some keys around, and he's got this kind of disgusted look on his face. I, being one of the more senior guys in the shop, ask what's up. He says the car he drove around just now was pretty messy but was the worst smelling car he had ever been in. I laugh at him, tell him to get back to work and pray I'm not the guy who has to work on it. Lucky me, I get it as my next job. No big deal. I've dealt with cars with moldy carpets, cars with rotten milk and eggs in them, cars with baby puke on the seats. How bad can it be? I get in the car and take a breath, gag, and nope out of there. Grab my undercoating respirator and return. Even this professional grade breathing apparatus does not fully block out the smell. The car is just in for a basic service, but I've got to know, man. The inside is kind of messy but nothing I'd really call abnormal. Empty McDonald's bag here, some old coffee cups there, a gym bag, some dog treats, and some old receipts and papers and junk. Nothing really offensive here. So I get it in the shop and do a light check, and get told the car has a burned out brake light. I pop the trunk and get out of the car, walk around it and open the trunk to change the bulb. Unfortunately, I found the source of the smell. Dog crap. The trunk is roughly half full with just raw dog turd. It's like the car owner just picked up their dog's poo and tossed it in the trunk, unbagged, slammed the trunk closed and drove the car outside. Managed to get out of it and the service manager reamed out the customer for even bringing the car in that condition. Worst day ever. When I got knocked unconscious by a blow to the head and woke up seeing stars, the Looney Tunes weren't kidding. Maybe it was just nighttime, bro. I had a stomach virus one night, firing out both ends multiple times, sometimes back to back. Ended up going to the ER because I was so dehydrated and couldn't keep anything down. So they hooked me up with an IV of water. One of the attendees came in and said, when you told us you had diarrhea 12 times, we thought you were just being dramatic, but then we looked at your blood work and realized, holy crap, this guy totally had diarrhea 12 times. Till, attendees can gauge how many times you've crapped by testing your blood. I realized that when my father was teaching me a maneuver to break the grip of an attacker on my wrist, and I was not really paying attention. I was only 8, and probably hungry due to it being right after school. Next thing I know, he bonks me on the head and says, pay attention. This may save your life one day. So I paid attention. He taught me how to break the grip of a person grabbing you, wrenching their pinky backwards so hard, your goal is to bend it so far back it breaks. 6 years later, I am 14 and my father died the year before, so I am now living with my mother in a not so nice part of town. I was riding my bike back home at around 6 PM in the winter dark hours, and it was slushy crap streets, so I was riding my bike on the sidewalk. Next thing I know, some huge sucker reaches out of a dark alley like some horror cartoon, and latches onto my arm, attempting to drag me and my bike into the tiny dark space between two buildings. His fist on my arm was the size of a ham and like a vice, and immediately I grabbed at it, then almost on reflex, grabbed his sausage pinky, and bent it back so hard, it snapped audibly like a dry fire twig. His reaction was instantaneous after that. At first, he did not recoil fast enough and bend his arm backwards to prevent his pinky from breaking. However, once the muted crack was heard, he bellowed in angry pain and took a knee, grasping his wrist. Later that night, after the adrenaline of police statements and impressed people subsided, I realized something. Holy crap, my father was right. He was not lying. That maneuver potentially saved my life. Backstory: I'm a nurse, and as most things go in life, nurses' families do not listen to their medical advice. I'm glad they did this time. February 2 years ago, my sister-in-law was sitting on the couch complaining of a stiff neck. She was 16 at the time. I didn't think anything of it. People get those every once in a while from sleeping wrong or whatever. She played a lot of sports also. We were playing something on her PS3 and she started to say, "I'm not feeling well." Her temp was 99.8, not too high. I went home, which is literally 5 houses down from my in-laws. About 30 minutes later, my mother-in-law calls me and says her fever is 103 and is rising fast. I immediately tell her to throw her ass in the car as fast as possible and take her to a children's hospital. She gets there and I arrive not far behind. At the check-in desk, I tell them that we need to see a doctor immediately and briefly explain what happened. I told the nurse that we need to test for meningitis. She looked at me and rolled her eyes. I told her I was a nurse and she had the classic symptoms of meningitis. For what the frick ever reason, she starts telling me the statistical chance of her actually having meningitis. She checked her temp and at this time her temp was 106.7. That remains to this day the highest fever I have ever seen. The doctor comes in pretty quick and I basically start barking orders at him. I told him about the stiff neck she was complaining of. About 3 hours later, they finally get someone who can do a lumbar puncture. The fluid that fills your spinal column and keeps your brain floating is called cerebrospinal fluid. It's supposed to look like pee. Pale yellow, no blood. Hers was white at first, then green, then yellow, but it was a dark yellow, almost like that nasty snot you get after a cold. She was positive for pneumococcal meningitis. I looked at the nurse and went off on her. You should always listen to your patient and to their family. They know more than you do about the patient. She spent 6 months in a hospital. 5 months she was connected to a vent. She made a full recovery and is doing fine now. I used to have a friend who would tell what seemed like far-fetched stories of his youth and stealing cop cars, etc. One day we got arrested together and back at the station one of the detectives looked at my friend's criminal history on the computer and said, "Holy crap mate, you have stolen more cop cars than I have driven." More holy crap, I wasn't lying. But 2 years ago I was sick with a nasty flu that wasn't going away. My wife was starting to think I was faking man flu to avoid work. Turns out I had a strain of bird flu that, once confirmed, had a mandatory notification and quarantine period away from the general public. Fortunately, she didn't contract it. Me as a kid. Where are my parents? My mom's friend who was sent over to watch me. Your mom went into labor, so they had to go to the hospital to have your sister. Me. No, really. Where are they? I was a very skeptical child who had just learned the truth about Santa. But lo and behold, my parents brought home a baby and my mom had lost a bunch of weight. Strange kid told me not to come to school tomorrow. I wasn't because I was going on holiday with my family. Next day he was found with a loaded 9mm in his bag. Weird kid told another kid not to come and other kid reported it. It's not an amazing story, but I found it quite impressive at the time. At a previous job, some of my co-workers and I went out after work to have drinks and shoot some pool at a local dive bar. We started playing a few games with some of the regulars when my friend, Roger, wagers that he can beat any of the other players using only one hand. My other friend and I looked at each other thinking Roger was full of crap. He was a good player, but he couldn't be that good, right? Nope. Turns out Roger was even better playing with one hand than with two and dominates the competition. He ended winning $20 after everything was said and done. When I was a kid, I was told always to check my pecans or I'd choke like my great uncle Carl. I had no clue who Cole was or if he was even real. When I was 15, I was eating pecans like candy and I started choking. Following that, I began searching Cal and found out he was my great granddad's youngest brother, and he died at 5 years old from choking on a pecan. This happened a long time ago, but I will never forget it. Had a friend that would borrow stuff or even steal stuff all the time and end up losing things in the process, or giving it to someone else and end up lying that it was missing. One thing he borrowed was my Diablo 2 and finally I went to his house to get it back because I really didn't want to see it to go missing. I got it and opened it up to see 3 discs inside. The case is a 4-disc CD case and I swore he must have lost one of the disc. I yelled at him a bunch to find it and I wanted it back ASAP. He finally felt bad enough that he went out and purchased not only Diablo 2 for me but the expansion. I opened it up right in front of him and there were 3 discs inside. When I was 4, we had this German Shepherd who bit people. My parents said they were going to give him to the police so he could be a police dog. Asked my mom recently if this was true or if they actually just had him put down. It wasn't. He actually got to be a police dog. Good on you, Maximum. Bro. When I complained to my wife that it's like she doesn't realize the way she talks to me is hurtful, and she responded, "Oh, Henry, I know exactly what I'm saying to you." After lots of reading about emotional abuse, I now know she was telling the truth. I am in the process of moving out of our house and filing for divorce. There was a super tiny girl in high school and one day she came up to the workout room. I was working the punching bag while a few others were on different machines. This girl walks over to the leg press and throws 600 freaking pounds on it. I laughed to myself and walked over and was about to tell her she's retarded when she started pumping away like it was nothing. Never been so afraid of a girl's legs in my life. Went back to my punching bag. I was out drinking with a solider. He got to talking about his time that he spent with President Bush. He spent 6 years working for that man. I thought he was drunk and bullshitting. He wasn't. He had lots and lots of proof. He was the active duty comm guy for Bush. There is a component of active duty military that serve directly to the president. They do various jobs. He was a part of that team from 2002 to 2008. I laughed when my boss told me my healthy 31-year-old manager died. He'd been home with the flu for a few days. It wasn't until the hardened police officer of over 30 years started crying that I realized he was telling the truth. You have been visited by the Bee of Jazz. Like this video to have your ears filled with cool jazz. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.